Good evening, this is Mr. Wintermelon. So you have learned about how our lung take in the air as well as breathe out the air. Inhale and exhale. But what happened to the oxygen after we inhale them? And what happened to the carbon dioxide before we can exhale them? How does the carbon dioxide come from our muscle cell to our lung and finally out from our body? All of these you will learn in this video. However, for the syllabus, you are only required to know the removal of carbon dioxide from our lung, and you need to include the role of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. So actually for this learning objective, we kind of gone through this. So for this learning objective, we kind of gone through this during transport in human. Just that the part on carbonic anhydrase, I have left it out. So I will talk about carbonic anhydrase in this video. So we have learned about breathing, inhalation and exhalation. In this video, we are going to focus on the gas exchange. What happened to the oxygen after it is forced into our alveoli? And how does carbon dioxide get transported from our respiring muscle cell to our lung and finally into our alveoli? For oxygen, it is important to note that the amount of oxygen forced into our lung have a higher concentration than the deoxygenated blood that came from the pulmonary artery. So this will set up a concentration gradient for diffusion of oxygen molecules to take place. What is important is the following. Oxygen molecules will dissolve in the thin layer of mucosa along the alveoli wall. After the oxygen molecules is dissolved, it will diffuse into the blood capillary. So remember, only when the oxygen molecules is in the aqueous state or the dissolved state, then it can dissolve into the wall and finally into the blood. So it will cross the one cell thick wall of the alveoli as well as blood capillary. Remember, the wall of the blood capillary is also one cell thick. So it will cross two layers of wall to reach the blood. So once it enters the blood, it will diffuse into the red blood cell, then it will bind reversibly with hemoglobin. What does binding reversibly means? It means that oxygen can bind to hemoglobin as well as quickly unbind from it or dissociate from hemoglobin. This will depend on the concentration of oxygen in the surrounding. In our lung, the concentration of oxygen is higher. So oxygen will bind to the hemoglobin. So the equation will shift to the right. That means more oxygen will bind to hemoglobin. Whereas in the respiring muscle cell, the concentration of oxygen is low because the muscle cell undergo aerobic respiration using up the oxygen. So in this case, when the oxygen concentration is low at muscle area, oxygen will dissociate from the hemoglobin and diffuse into the muscle, allowing it to continue its aerobic respiration. So this is what happened to the oxygen molecules. It dissolved in the thin layer of mucosa and it diffused across the wall of the alveoli as well as blood capillary. Then it will diffuse into the red blood cell and bind to hemoglobin. And when the red blood cell reaches region of poor oxygen concentration, the oxygen will dissociate from the hemoglobin. As for carbon dioxide, it's a bit more complicated. In actively respiring tissue, as the carbon dioxide concentration is high, it will diffuse into the red blood cell. The carbon dioxide molecules will react with water, forming carbonic acid. So this reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme known as carbonic anhydrase. So what you have to remember is carbon dioxide plus water will give you carbonic acid. This carbonic acid will further dissociate into hydrogen carbonate ions as well as hydrogen. They will then diffuse into the blood plasma. So if you look at the chart on the right, it describes the whole process nicely. And these two reactions are both reversible. The important thing to take note here is where does carbonic anhydrase does its job. It does its job by combining carbon dioxide to water, forming carbonic acid. Now, the part on dissociating is actually not difficult to understand why it doesn't require enzyme. Dissociation is pretty much meaning that carbonic acid dissolves. Just like your salt dissolve, does dissolving of salt require any enzyme? No. So the dissociation of carbonic acid also does not require enzyme. Our red blood cell will then travel to the lung, and hydrogen carbonate ion in the blood will then combine with hydrogen ion to form carbonic acid. So this happens in the lung, and carbonic acid will be converted back into carbon dioxide as well as water with the help of the enzyme, which is carbonic anhydrase. So carbonic anhydrase convert carbon dioxide and water into carbonic acid, as well as the reverse, which is carbonic acid back into carbon dioxide and water. So this is done in the red blood cell. And after you get your carbon dioxide, what will happen is the carbon dioxide will diffuse across the red blood cell, then diffuse across the capillary into the airspace in alveoli, which will then get expelled out from the lung when we exhale. So that is all for carbon dioxide. The important thing to take note is the function of carbonic anhydrase, which reaction it is responsible for. The easy way of remembering is enzyme is not involved in dissociation or molecules becoming ion. Finally, this slide is actually not required for your O-level syllabus, but I just thought that it's important for you to know as a general knowledge, because NT students probably will know this. For the air that we breathe in, it contains mostly nitrogen, which is not shown here, followed by oxygen, which is 21%, and carbon dioxide, that is 0.03%. Now, if you take a look at the exhaled air, you can see that the amount of oxygen is actually still more than the amount of carbon dioxide, even though we might have the misconception that the air we breathe out contains more carbon dioxide. No, that's not true. Whether it's the air that you breathe in or the air that you breathe out, it contains more oxygen. Why is this the case? Because the sheer percentage of oxygen is so much higher than carbon dioxide. Therefore, it's not possible that we breathe out such a high percentage of carbon dioxide. And that's it for this video.